Welcome to Newscentre. Our focus now on corporate governance. The representation of women in corporate boardrooms has remained largely stagnant this year. However, there has been a steady increase in the number of women taking independent director positions. This according to a survey by Excellence Enablers. The report also noted that while the presence of female independent directors on boards has been mandated, there is no similar provision for women executives graduating to board positions. Furthermore, the survey noted that the average age of the boardroom is over 63 years. Out of 561 independent directors, only 19 are below the age of 50. Former SEBI chairman M Damodaran is joining us now. He's also the founder and chairperson of corporate governance advisory firm Excellence Enablers, which has prepared this survey. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Damodaran, on the show today. Let me begin by asking you about the representation of women on boards of top listed companies in India. While there has been an improvement in terms of representation, the survey also notes that only 5 companies had women chairs and only 5 had women managing directors. Do you think it is time to consider mandating more representation of women in boards across the country?
Thank you for having me on your show. I have been consistently against mandatory provisions, whether to bring in women as independent directors or to bring in women as non-independent directors. What happens with mandatory provisions is that some boxes get ticked. You don't respect the fact that there is value in bringing people of quality to the board. And mandating for having more women in a non-independent position, in an executive position, it's not going to help. It won't happen overnight. There aren't enough people in the ecosystem as we speak now. It'll take a while. We have to see gradual improvements. Unless you introduce things like fast tracking in regard to promotion of competent women who are serving the company, bringing in people from outside the company who might fit the bill, all of those have to be done, plus certain other things which will address the issue of why there are less women in the company in executive positions. Some of them, for various reasons, have to take a break. Some of them come back, some don't come back, they stay away. So the supply is not adequate, and I think NRCs need to look around, cast the net wide, and see how this problem can be addressed.
Right. Speaking to you also about the average age of the chairman of or chairperson of boards of various companies. As of March 31st, 2024, the average age, tenure that somebody has served is about 13 years, with the longest tenure being 51 years. The longest tenure of an audit committee chair is about 23 years, 13 years for an NRC chair, and 24 years for a SRC chair. What needs to be done about this?
I think when we make provisions for tenure, we need to ensure that previous tenures are factored in so that someone who served for 2 or 3 decades doesn't get to start afresh with 0 and get another 5-year or a 10-year term, because then you're not doing anything to change the complexion of the board. This happened in the case of independent directors, where you said past tenures will not be counted, so the count started from 2014, and it's only in 2024 that we've seen a bunch of people exiting boards after 2 terms of 5 years each. So I think the way to go about it is make some concession if need be for those that have been around for a long time, but also see that those who've been there for 50 years, 40 years, don't continue for another 10-year term, because then you are getting back to that, the famous song, Jeena Yahan, Marna Yahan. Why push people to that?
Right. And it impacts innovation as well. If you have a chairperson of the board who's been around for 2 decades, somewhere it impacts thinking and innovation for the future. Would you agree?
I not only agree, we have gone as far as to suggest that there should be rotation of chairs. Even if somebody is continuing on the board, if you have somebody who's chaired a committee, let's say for 5 years, let that person move on somewhere else and get another chair. Why do you want someone chairing a committee for 10 years? I don't think that is required. So we need to see rotation. That's extremely important in my view.
Right. On the question of pay disparities, time and again, questions have been raised about remuneration of certain CEOs or chairpersons of top listed companies. What is the role that the Nomination and Remuneration Committee can play here? Do you think this is something that needs more regulatory oversight?
No, I'm not a great believer in regulators regulating for everything under the sun. Far from that. NRCs definitely have a role. And what NRCs need to do is to do some benchmarking. Look at how similarly placed companies are compensating their executives. Is your compensation out of line? You need to have good reasons. More important, I think, than the absolute quantum is the amount of variable pay that you have. You should not have a very high fixed element and a very small variable element, because then you can relate the compensation that is paid at the end of the year to the performance of the previous 12 months. If that is not done, you will have a problem. And yes, some companies, the shareholders have protested at the abnormal hikes in pay, and I think they need to protest. They need to ask these questions. Are we overcompensating people who are not delivering adequate?
Right. In terms of risk management, the number of risks that companies face that has been growing year to year, you have said that the risk management committees should be given statutory recognition. What are some of the key risks that you have come across in your survey, and which you also feel the companies will have to be prepared for in future?
I think what we have stated in our survey is that we should make the risk management committee a statutory committee. And why are we saying this? When the 2013 Act came, there were 4 mandatory committees to the board. Risk management was not one of them. It was much later that SEBI, through regulations, through the LODR, mandated the setting up of a risk management committee, which again could have a mix of board members and non-board members. Because risk is now more critical than it ever was. Not that it wasn't critical, but now it's staring at you in the face. The number and nature of risks have expanded hugely. Now, for example, just rewind for a few years. Whoever thought that COVID would impact corporate boardrooms, and yet without exception it did. So there are unanticipated risks that you cannot plan for, which you cope with when it actually happens. Equally, or if not more, there are a large number of risks you need to address. Succession planning, for example. Attrition in the workforce is a huge risk. What happens if people move out in large numbers and you're unable to replace them? What happens if your KMPs suddenly decide that organic farming or writing poetry is a better option than being on the boards and to facing all those liabilities? So you need to plan for those eventualities. Cybersecurity is a huge problem. And as technology advances, the negative impact of technology will be evidenced not just in boardrooms, but everywhere else. Now, don't wait for the problem to hit you. Look at what's happening in other companies and learn from them and put your defense mechanisms, your guardrails in place. That is critical. That's certainly one of them. There are several others, but 2 risks that companies need to look at. One is there a conflict of interest, existing or potential? Number 2, is there asymmetry of information that adversely impacts on the way companies function? These are huge mother risks, and several other risks derive from that.
Okay, yes, important points there, sir. What we'd also like to ask you that when it comes to the evaluation of the performance of the board, the accountability of the board, do you feel that any more emphasis or certain changes are needed to make the boards more accountable? And also in terms of corporate governance of companies itself, do you feel that is there any aspect where there is a glaring lack of attention, according to you?
I think you're an optimist. You have said whether anything more needs to be done. I think we are near zero state. Out of the 100 companies, there are only 20 that have reached out to outside bodies in order to undertake a robust evaluation. Most of them have done it in-house. And in-house evaluation is everyone gets 6 out of 5. You have meaningless questionnaires. You have a 1 to 5 scale, and everybody is better than the best. And yet the boards don't perform as collective entities. Get people from the outside. Our recommendation has been that, and not now, but even earlier, that at least once in 3 years, get somebody which is experienced, which has first-hand boardroom experience in its members, to come and conduct a robust evaluation process. And thereafter, the next year, you can follow those same criteria and do it in-house. So there is hardly any evaluation taking place. Something is happening in the name of evaluation. More importantly, we are not even relating the compensation of directors to the results of evaluation. There is no feedback being given to the directors. What is the point of an evaluation if the directors are not told how they measure up? That's not happening in many companies. So this is an area where much, much more needs to be done.
Right. My final question would be about the time period from the time when your accounts, audited accounts, are disclosed and the AGM takes place. You have said that in FY24, the maximum duration was 133 days and 80 companies held their AGMs after the recommended 45-day period. How does this impact governance according to you?
Well, it seriously does. On the face, it might seem to be not so important. But the fact is, when you have, let's say, a large body of retail shareholders, they know that the accounts have been finalized. And then you are not taking it to the AGM to get it approved by the shareholders, which means there is delay in their dividends being approved. There is delay in their being able to raise with auditors in the AGMs issues that have cropped up during that year. Because if you leave it too late, somehow the edge goes away. Several other things overtake your thought processes, and then it just assumes less importance. I think it's important that as soon as the accounts are finalized, you must find a way to quickly get to the shareholders, hold the AGMs. And these days, you don't even have to actually go around looking for a large hall. A lot of people are doing it virtually. So I think this is a serious matter and people need to. The reason why, and I'm looking at my screen, it says declining AGM engagement is by the time it takes place, by the time and then we have another issue here, which is that one meeting took just 19 minutes, one meeting, the AGM. What kind of sham are we going through?
Important points there, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on the program with key takeaways from the Corporate Governance Survey. Lots to think about, lots for companies to implement, and hopefully all of this will be followed in the days to come. Thank you once again for being with us. Before we wrap this edition of Newscentre, we bring you a collaborative initiative by Grow and CNBC-TV18. Our mission is to equip you with valuable insights and strategies to make informed trading decisions. Today, we will help you understand why you should not trade during certain market hours. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
It's late, the markets are quiet, but you're tempted to trade. Beware. This is when real risks creep in. During overnight hours, liquidity is low, spreads widen, and market movements become unpredictable. Even small trades can cause big price swings. Global events can unfold while you are sleeping. Unexpected announcements, geopolitical shocks, or even policy decisions can create massive gaps at the market open, leaving you blindsided. The solution? Avoid overnight trades. Instead, focus on active hours when liquidity is higher and market reactions are more in control. Use tools to track global events and set stop losses if you must hold positions overnight. By avoiding overnight trades, you reduce unnecessary risk, protect your capital, and sleep peacefully, knowing that your portfolio isn't at the mercy of unexpected events.